At my daughter-in-law's birthday party, she hurled a 10-kilogram chocolate cake into my face. The room went silent except for the soft slap of ganache sliding down my cardigan. I didn't wipe it away. I didn't scream. I smiled, because the microphone pinned under that very cardigan was already recording, and in 10 minutes the same cake that humiliated me would ruin her plan. My name is Mara. I'm 66, and I have the kind of intuition the women in my family call a weather sense, the quiet pressure in the bones that lets you predict a storm long before the clouds gather. The first day I met Vivian, I felt that shift in the air. She was luminous, careful, and impossibly pleasant, and yet something inside me whispered, "Beware the still lake that hides deep water." I never said that, of course. I'm a mother of one son, Theo, and mothers who speak too plainly about their sons' girlfriends either lose the son or start a war that cannot be won. So I smiled and squeezed hands and congratulated. The first third of the story will tell you why I stayed polite. Because if you'd been in my shoes, you would have liked her too. Theo brought her to Sunday dinner in late spring. She stepped into my kitchen carrying sunflowers and a chocolate cream pie she said was an old family recipe. She had a soft, confident voice and the kind of posture that makes dresses hang well. She wore minimal makeup and comfortable flats. She asked if she could help with the roast, if she should set the table, if I preferred the forks in the European or American style. She listened when I talked about my late husband. She laughed at Theo's terrible jokes in a way that made them sound better. When she poured water for herself, she topped off everyone's glass without asking. "Vivian," I said, "you've done this before." "I like hosting," she replied. "I like families." That first evening, I believed her. At the dishes, I told her where the towels were, and she dried each plate as if it were a delicate instrument. "Your son," she said quietly, "speaks of you like you hung the moon." She glanced at the photographs on my wall. Theo in a Little League uniform, Theo with a missing front tooth, Theo at his college graduation. The soft smile that crossed her face would have convinced any reasonable woman. "I want to take good care of him," she added. That should have been sweet. It was. It also sounded like a promise with careful punctuation. Over the next months, Vivian became gravity in our family, subtle, constant, impossible to argue with. She texted me recipes and asked for mine. When I mentioned a classical concert, she surprised us with tickets and let me choose the seats. She insisted on calling me Mara rather than Mrs. Benson, which felt respectful and friendly all at once. When Theo had a long week at the firm, she delivered homemade soup to my door with a note, "You taught him to work hard. I'll remind him to rest." Once, I forgot my reading glasses at a cafe. The next day, Vivian showed up with a small chain for my frames so I'd never be without them again. She said it gently, like a granddaughter, and slid the chain across the table as if passing a secret across enemy lines. I allowed myself a conditional trust. They moved in together at the end of summer. She kept the apartment bright, houseplants, a lemon-scented candle that somehow never overwhelmed the room, a whiteboard calendar with color-coded squares for work, dinners, birthdays, Mara's book club, and call mom. She made space for his hobbies and mine. She urged him to visit me each Sunday morning and come home with leftover roast in labeled containers. She kept my Tupperware organized like a museum exhibit. "Mom," Theo told me, "this is the happiest I've ever been." What else is there to say when your son says that? You pray you are wrong about the chill in the air. You let love be louder than caution. They announced their engagement in early autumn at the park where Theo learned to ride his bike. Vivian wore a blue dress, the exact shade of his old Little League jersey, a detail that did not feel accidental. She gave a small speech about building a partnership, about how she wanted to connect families, how she valued wisdom. She asked me if I'd walk with her down the aisle before the ceremony so we could arrive together. I said yes. Even then, small gusts bent the grass. During a florist visit, she asked for peonies and restraint, then laughed and said, "Of course, if budget allows, we can always scale back." She said the word budget like an honorific. She urged Theo to keep contributing to his retirement account. She insisted they sign the wedding contracts in both their names, fair and square. She didn't want a big wedding, she said, just a thoughtful one. All correct, all reasonable. She took a photo with me and posted, grateful for Mara's kindness and stories. I want to be like her someday. It earned a galaxy of hearts. She forwarded me the sweet comments. See, she wrote. People know how special you are. I wanted to like her. I did like her. If you were reading then, you'd have defended her too. But my weather sense kept tapping the barometer. One evening, after Theo and Vivian had dropped me off, I realized my grocery list had slipped out of my bag. It was late. I texted to leave it on the porch. 5 minutes later, Vivian replied with a cheerful, already on your welcome, Matt. Good night. I opened the door. The list wasn't there. That meant she had a spare key. It was a small thing, and a practical one. Theo had a key, but she'd said on your mat, not inside. A gust rattled the window. I told myself I was being dramatic. Stop it, Mara, I thought. Trust the evidence of your eyes, which sees a kind woman, rather than the echo of a memory that warns of storms. The wedding was elegant and exactly as advertised: small, thoughtful, restrained. Vivian included a moment in the ceremony to honor my late husband. She surprised me by using our family recipe for seed cake at the reception, and she credited me in the program. She danced with me to Theo's childhood lullaby. When they left for their weekend trip, she pressed a folded note into my hand. Thank you for raising him. I sat on my porch that night and allowed myself to exhale. Now, when a story begins with a cake thrown in a grandmother's face, you know sweetness hardens. But in the ordinary way of life, it often takes time to reach that crack. The days after the wedding were mostly normal. Theo at work, Vivian at work, me pruning my geraniums, all three of us meeting for coffee on Saturdays. In winter, Vivian organized our family's secret Santa and made sure I drew someone easy. She bought me a new sewing basket with compartments so neat I felt organized just opening it. She remembered my book club night and texted, hope the ending satisfies. And then, tiny things became tiny knives. At a dinner out, the server asked if the check should be split. Vivian smiled and said, Theo's got us, a casual phrase that landed like a thumb on a scale. When Theo had a new client, she updated her LinkedIn with a post about supporting a partner's success, with a photograph that conveniently included his watch and my son's car keys. She joked about upping our lives in the next 5 years, and when I asked what that meant, she said, whatever is most responsible. Maybe a townhouse. Maybe a baby. Maybe both. And something in the order of the words felt rehearsed. Then Theo called me late one night. Viv's thinking maybe we skip the prenup we discussed, he said. She thinks it introduces distrust. My weather sense whistled. Theo, I said softly, you can love someone and still love boundaries. Good fences keep lambs in and wolves out, and sometimes they even keep lambs from wandering. He laughed, then sighed. You always have parables. Call them pothole markers, I said. You still decide the route. They signed a prenuptial agreement anyway, the quiet, unromantic kind that says, let's keep what we had before, and let's build new things together on purpose. I encouraged them both to consult their own attorneys. Vivian thanked me for being fair. She added a sentence to protect my house. She kissed my cheek. It all looked so healthy I wondered if my intuition had simply turned mean with age. But if you bend closer to the lake, you might notice the current. Vivian began asking little questions that netted big information. Mara, she would say, did Theo mention how much his bonus was? We should plan our savings. Mara, how much do you spend on utilities in winter? We're trying to anticipate. Mara, you're so smart with money. Did Theo keep any accounts from college we should consolidate? Each question was legitimate. Each time, I gave a gentle deflection. Love, that's something you two should discuss together. I'm delighted you're planning. So she asked Theo instead, and because he is earnest, he answered. I know because sometimes he answered in front of me. The break came on the day of the cake. It was Vivian's 30th birthday, and she planned a retro bake-off at a rented event space, a cheerful warehouse with exposed brick and long communal tables. The theme was chocolate interpretations. Guests arrived carrying cookies, torts, and 3 impressive sculptures of Coco and Hope. The centerpiece was Vivian's showstopper, a double-tiered chocolate cake so glossy it reflected faces, heavy as a newborn calf. On the menu card, she wrote, 10 kilograms of love. Theo had arranged for a projector to scroll photos from Vivian's childhood, summers at the lake, braces, pets, as well as their months together, the two of them grinning at a farmer's market at a trailhead. In front of a small mural I recognized as the wall near my hairdresser. Vivian had printed place cards that matched the color of each dessert. She had a small speech ready. Of course she did. 30 is a map, she said, and I'm grateful for the coordinates. The room applauded. A violinist played. Champagne made small cheerful fireworks and flutes. If the night had ended there, I'd have written a different story. But while Theo greeted friends near the door, I headed toward the coat room to adjust my cardigan and, yes, to check the small microphone a friend had given me after I joined a community theater group that uses head mics for readings. I had it because earlier that week I'd heard something that made the storm arrive. 2 days before the party, I'd stopped by their apartment with a thermos of chicken soup. I'd knocked, waited, then let myself in with the spare key Theo insisted I keep in case of emergencies. The place was quiet except for Vivian's voice in the bedroom, low and practical, the tone she used to order flowers. I would have called out, but the words pinned me. No, I told you, she said, he has real assets, but the prenup blocks a direct claim. The better path is qualifying as a caregiver with a baby on the way, then initiating a separation under, yes, no, trust me, the optics matter. He's sweet and conflict-averse. We can get a favorable settlement. I'm not trying to get greedy. 50 is fair. 50. She wasn't talking about percentages of cake slices. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Vivian continued, so calmly I could have mistaken the conversation for a grocery list. The timeline is simple. We conceive. We separate after the first trimester. We claim irreconcilable differences and position me as primary caregiver. He'll negotiate quickly. He hates embarrassment. If he resists, there's the text thread where he joked about work being his true first child. Courts love a narrative. Then a pause. Stop, she whispered, chuckling. I'm not a villain. I like him. But my window is now. I placed the thermos on the console table like a sacrament, and I left. My hands shook too hard to drive. I walked 3 blocks before I could unlock my phone. The friend I called that afternoon, my neighbor, Alma, works as a paralegal. She listened to my halting breath. Recordings are tricky, she said. Don't trespass, don't bait. But if you're present in a public space and people volunteer their words, you're allowed to remember. Sometimes remembering means recording. She hesitated. Mara, if this is real, Theo needs to know. But you need the kind of evidence that survives denial. So I charged the tiny microphone used at our readings. I slipped it into my cardigan pocket the night of the party, telling myself maybe I'd capture toasts for a keepsake video. I believe in keepsakes. I also believe in weather. At the coat room, I adjusted the pin and checked that the small green light still glowed. That's when Vivian walked in, phone to her ear, the easy smile she wore for the room resting for a moment. She didn't see me behind the shelving. Yes, she whispered. A pause. Not worried. Another pause. She laughed. He's a lamb. Then, lightly, I'm putting out the cake. She hung up, turned, and saw me. Mara, there you are. She kissed my cheek, and for a moment the old sweetness returned. Ready? Happy birthday, I said. She took my hand and led me to the stage where the cake waited like a small planet. Theo joined us, beaming, one hand on her shoulder. The guests gathered. The violinist paused. Vivian lifted the knife, then paused. First, she said, I want to thank the person who taught Theo the meaning of constancy, Mara. A wave of applause rose, and, in the same movement, something dark crossed her face, as if a shadow fell under a cloud. Later, I would find out why. In that moment, I saw just the flicker. Although, she added lightly, sometimes constancy can turn into rigidity, can't it? A ripple of polite laughter. She turned to me, smile bright, knife above the glaze. Shall we cut it, together? Of course, I said, and reached for the handle. She changed her mind in a heartbeat's heartbeat. I don't know if she saw the small green pin light under my sweater. I don't know if something I couldn't hear twisted her mood. I know that she grabbed the cake stand, lifted it with a dancer's strength, and, still smiling, shoved the entire 10 kilograms forward. The cold, heavy sweetness hit me like a wall. Chocolate slid into my ears, my hair, the hollow at my collarbone. The room gasped. I heard a single glass drop and roll. It is a strange thing to be humiliated and entirely calm. I planted my feet. I took the weight of it. And I said, in the steady voice I used for lullabies, "Vivian, why did you do that?" She blinked. Her chest rose and fell. The mask returned almost immediately. "It was a joke," she said brightly. "A silly prank." She tilted her head as if to place the moment inside an Instagram story. "Happy birthday to me?" Theo, bless him, reached for napkins big enough to bandage a horse. "What on earth, Viv?" "Relax," she laughed and patted his cheek with chocolate fingers. "Live a little. It's cake." The violinist didn't dare play. Some guests tittered. Others stared. And I, chocolate dripping like slow rain, did not move my hands. Because sometimes the next sentence is a key in a lock, and if you wipe your face you miss the turn. I said, very softly, "It is cake. It's also evidence." Her face tightened at the word. She opened her mouth to protest. I lifted a single finger and addressed the room. "Friends," I said, "I hate to interrupt a party. I am too old to love drama. But when a storm is coming, you close the windows. Vivian, I heard you on Wednesday. You were on the phone in your bedroom. I didn't mean to overhear. You sounded very clear." A tremor traveled through the crowd. Theo went still as a photograph. "Mom," he whispered. I turned to my son. I couldn't bear his eyes, so I watched his shoulder. "She said she would marry, conceive, separate in the first trimester, and pursue what she called a favorable settlement. She said 50 was fair." Vivian laughed too loudly. "This is absurd," she said without looking at Theo. She misheard. She always mishears. I took the microphone from my cardigan pocket and placed it on the cake table, its small green light still winking. "Then we should clear it up. We can step into the next room, and you can explain the plan I misunderstood." She didn't move. Theo's voice, when it came, was careful as a man crossing thin ice. "Viv," he said, "did you say those words?" She exhaled through her nose. "People say things," she murmured. "You know how I talk. I exaggerate. It was venting. I was anxious about timelines." That was the first crack. The second arrived in the form of the baker, a woman with frosting on her sleeve, who had come forward because she is, above all else, a baker, and bakers hate to see good cake wasted. "Miss James," she said to Vivian, "please step back from the table." "Excuse me?" Vivian snapped. "Back," the baker repeated. "You signed for the cake, but the balance isn't paid yet. If we're throwing it around, I'll need a card." Theo turned to the baker. "What do you mean balance?" Vivian flinched. "I was going to settle it," she said quickly. "After the party." The baker pulled a folded invoice from her apron pocket. "As we agreed," she said politely, half up front, half on delivery. She glanced at me, then at the chocolate slide coloring the floor. "Delivery complete." The room felt new. The word delivery landed like a gavel. Theo reached for the invoice, then stopped. "Who put the deposit on the cake, Viv?" She lifted her chin. "We both did." "Which card?" She did not answer. It was not the price of the cake that mattered, it was the truth in the habit. The habit of assuming Theo would pay and not notice. The habit of speaking about our money when he offered generosity and my independence when she offered restraint. The habit of planning outcomes quietly and calling that grace. I did not intend to expose her further in public. I didn't want to hurt my son more than necessary. My plan had been to gather, to record, to show Theo in the quiet of my kitchen and let him choose his life. But she had accelerated the weather. So I did what good captains do when the sky goes green. I adjusted my sails. "Let's pause the party," I said to the room. "Friends, have a drink. Vivian, Theo, may we step into the office down the hall? Just us." Theo nodded. Vivian smiled with the brittle brightness of a display apple. "Lead the way." In the small office, I closed the door, turned to them both, and set the microphone on the desk. I pressed play. It wasn't a perfect recording. There was the hum of a fan, the creak of pipes, my own heartbeat like a footstep on a stair. But the important words were clear. He has real assets. The better path is a baby. We separate after the first trimester. 50 is fair. Theo listened the way a boy listens to the teacher when he thinks he knows the answer and learns instead that the test is about a subject he did not study. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at me. He looked at the edge of the desk and breathed in through his nose and out through his mouth like a swimmer. When the recording ended, he didn't speak. He pushed his palms into his eyes and stayed very still. Vivian moved first. She took a step toward him. Theo, it was a stupid call, she said. I was showboating for a friend. I wanted to sound in control. You know I get anxious about time. You know I want a family, our family. I was venting because I'm scared. Isn't that human? Who are you speaking to? He asked without looking up. A friend. Name. It doesn't matter. It does. She swallowed. Elise, she said finally. From grad school. Put the phone on the table, I said. My voice surprised me, measured, almost kind. Open the thread with Elise. Something in my steadiness unnerved her more than anger would have. She unlocked her phone, scrolled, then stopped. I don't see it. Search for 50, Theo said. She typed froze, then set the phone down with the screen face up. Even if you've never seen a map, you understand the shape of a trap. Thread after thread bloomed with keywords. Timeline. Settlement. Optics. He hates embarrassment. Baby equals leverage. Don't worry, ironclad prenups leak. Theo read. His cheeks went pale. He tapped another thread, this one with someone named Trevor. Who is Trevor? An old friend. Why does Trevor have an itemized spreadsheet of what happens if, he couldn't say the word. If we had a child and separated, she finished, as if clarifying a grocery list. My son set the phone down as if it were heavy. He looked up at her then, finally, not as a man looks at his love, but as a man looks at a stranger who knows his door code. Viv, he said quietly, did you marry me because you love me, or because I make your math easier? Silence. And in silence, a person reveals themselves. Both, she said at last. I liked you. I still do. But I also don't intend to be poor. Neither do I, he said. I grew up poor. That's why I worked. That's why I saved. Not so it could be divided by a strategy you wrote with Trevor. She stepped closer. I didn't say now. I said someday if we were unhappy. Lots of marriages end. I was trying to. Forecast, I said gently. Like a weather report. Her eyes flashed. Yes. And speaking of reports, you recorded me. That's not loving. Neither is aiming a cake, I replied. She exhaled. Fine, she said. I made mistakes. Let's go back to the party. I'll apologize for the cake. We'll say Mara misheard the call. No one needs this drama. Theo, we're good together. We can be a team. We can. My son looked at his hands for a long time, then stood. He's tall, like his father was, but he has my father's eyes, the kind that look like steady weather even in a storm. We're going to leave this room, he said evenly, and we're going to tell people the party is over and that we need privacy. Tomorrow morning we will talk. We will also talk to my attorney. She stiffened. Attorney? Prenuptial agreements exist for times like this, he said, sounding older than he had that morning and younger than he would tonight. We will follow ours. She laughed a small, hot laugh. I can contest it. You can try, I said, because I am allowed one sentence of steel. But you will lose. You might think the story ends here in that small office, because once a person shows you their map, the rest is just driving. But storms linger. You always have to deal with what the wind knocks down. The next day, Theo moved into my guest room. He didn't cry. He washed the pillowcase and folded it carefully as if respect could solve grief. He called his attorney and sent the threads I'd saved, copies, not originals. Alma had taught me well, and forwarded the voice recording. He wrote a clear message to Vivian, we will communicate through counsel. He did not accuse. He did not insult. He did not even mention the cake. Vivian replied with a single sentence, you are overreacting. An hour later, she sent another, I'm late. She was not. Her calendar app said as much. Alma, who knows how people move when they wish to stay where they are, told me so. They often say that, Alma said. It's leverage. Don't respond. Keep everything tidy. Tidy. Such a boring word. Such a powerful one. Then came a week of small earthquakes, a call from a mutual friend urging compassion, a gentle DM from someone Vivian had met at a yoga class linking to an article about healthy boundaries with controlling mothers, a bouquet of peonies on my porch with a card in handwriting that wasn't hers, leave them alone. I made tea. I read my mystery novel. I cleaned the chocolate out of the creases of my sweater, one careful stitch at a time. The legal process, as these things do, unfolded in incremental steps, a preliminary meeting, disclosures, an exchange of proposed terms. Vivian's attorney wrote a crisp letter asserting that the prenuptial agreement was overly restrictive and emotionally coercive. Theo's attorney replied with patience and exhibits, including a cute photo of the two of them holding pens the day they signed, and the email from Vivian herself thanking her attorney for making the contract feel empowering. Facts are so dull. They're also unstoppable. Vivian attempted a different route. She emailed Theo directly with phrases like, "We can still salvage this," and "Think of our future child," and "Your mother is poisoning you." He did not respond. He saved the emails. He forwarded them to his attorney with a simple line, "For the record." When Vivian realized the door would not open to talking around the rules, she tried force. She posted an artful photograph on social media, a pale hand on a flat stomach, a caption of 3 hearts and a sprig of rosemary. In the comments, her friends congratulated her. One tagged Theo. He called Alma in a panic. "What if," he said, unable to finish. "If it's true, you will be a good father," Alma said. But truth is not a caption. Ask for documentation through counsel. Do not be baited into statements you don't want screenshotted. The documentation did not come. The post disappeared quietly at midnight. That, more than any recording or thread, told me Vivian's real calendar. Even then, I would have sat on my hands if Vivian had chosen a decent exit. People marry for the wrong reasons every day. People panic and posture and overplan. There is mercy for that. But when her attorney realized the prenuptial agreement would hold, Vivian rang my doorbell at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday and stood on my porch with a cardigan that looked snatched on the way out and said, without good evening or good sense, "I know what you did. You sabotaged this." I opened the screen door halfway. "I recorded what you said." "You broke my life," she hissed. "You were dismantling my son's," I said calmly. He asked me, once upon a time, to hold a line if he ever forgot how. I did. She stepped closer. "Do you even want grandchildren? Did it occur to you that your selfishness might have cost you the only chance you have?" I considered her then, the bright planner, the thoughtful gift giver, the woman who dries plates carefully and names boundaries a breach only when they block her path. And I said the quiet truth. I want grandchildren who are born into rooms where the adults tell the truth. She backed down one step. "You'll regret this," she said, and left. I did not. I slept like rain. There were final twists, of course. Vivian tried to reframe the story at the preliminary hearing. She said I was threatening, that I had inserted myself, that Theo had a pattern of deference, which is lawyer talk for love. Theo's attorney asked for specifics. Vivian's attorney presented none. We provided the peonies card and the yoga DM. Alma smiled without showing teeth. The best stories don't need a courtroom scene. They need a clean decision. After 6 weeks of letters, the tone of Vivian's messages changed. Fewer adjectives, more questions about logistics. She asked for her things. Theo packed them carefully. Sweaters, books, the lemon-scented candle with half a wick. He labeled boxes by room when he could have labeled them by memory. On a gray afternoon, her attorney called with a simple proposal. The marriage would end by mutual agreement. Each party would keep what they brought to the partnership and what they earned separately. There would be no spousal support. There would be no claim on my house. There would be no public accusations. There would be, in short, an exit with dignity. Vivian had not found the leverage she needed. She had found, instead, a line of evidence like a neat fence around a modest garden. She could rattle the posts. She could not take the roses. Theo signed. She signed. It was over. On the day he moved back to his apartment, he stood in my kitchen holding a plant Vivian had given us the day she first came to dinner. He pressed his thumb against the soil. "It's dry," he said. "Water it," I said, and handed him a glass. We stood there a moment, two people who had weathered a sudden storm, watching a plant drink. He looked up at me and, for the first time since the party, smiled without weight. "Thank you," he said, "for being steady." I wasn't steady, I said honestly. I wobbled. I wanted to be wrong about her. I still want to be wrong about people. But love isn't telling the weather it's sunny when it rains. Love is carrying an umbrella and a towel. He laughed, then winced at his own laugh. Healing is a tender thing. In the weeks that followed, he resumed ordinary life. Work, running, dinners. He deleted photographs slowly, not because the past is poison, but because sometimes it needs labeling and storage. He bought himself a new set of mugs that do not remember the morning she joked about the china we'll get in the divorce. He found a therapist who specializes in boundary guilt. He learned to say, without apology, no, not now, and I'll think and reply tomorrow. And me? I threw a small perverse party with my book club where we ate the best chocolate cake in the city with forks like tridents, and not a single one of us got any on our cardigans. We toasted good fences. We toasted dull facts. We toasted lemon-scented candles and the neighbor Alma who knows the grammar of evidence. And then we did what my family always does after storms. We went outside and checked the yard, picked up the branches, swept the porch, and measured the rain in a jam jar for the satisfaction of knowing exactly what had fallen. Every now and then, someone asks if I regret the recording, the confrontation, the cake moment that turned a birthday into a cautionary tale. Regret is a strange word for a door that shut before the wolf got in. I'm not proud of the spectacle. I wish the office conversation had happened without frosting in my ears. But humiliation is temporary. Evidence is permanent. If you've read this far, maybe you're someone's Mara. Maybe you hate drama and love the quiet click of a lock that works and the steady hum of a refrigerator you can trust. Maybe people tell your intuition makes you unkind. It doesn't. It makes you a barometer. Barometers don't cause storms. They reveal them. And, because I promised you the payoff up top, here it is as plain as a ledger. My daughter-in-law threw a 10-kilogram chocolate cake in my face. I recorded her admitting she married my son for money and planned a pregnancy to force a divorce and a settlement. She tried everything from charm to captions to bend the weather, and my son divorced her without giving her a single dollar, because good fences, good counsel, and good evidence will always keep the roof on in a squall.
So, another story of my grandmother has end, and be clicking here, you will have when more such stories.